In terms of AI, earlier this year, we had an AI workshop, and one of the things that Peter said is how much things have changed since then, where we've already had to change and adapt. But I will share 2 articles that I used to preface our conversation at that workshop. One of them was about Paul McCartney using AI to finish the most recent Beatles song, if you've heard it. I kind of like it. But the interesting thing is that was the title. That was the sort of CNN title. And really what he was doing is he was using the technology to clean up a lot of the things that they had recorded. And so there, it didn't seem quite as radical as I thought it was going to be from the title itself. I assumed that somehow we were going to generate a John, and John would be singing in the song because he was using AI to complete the song. And the reason I bring that up is because I think a lot of the technology that feeds into something like ChatGPT is technology that's been with us for a while. And in one of the short-term webinars that I was part of, one of the speakers was referring to AI as something that we only apply to something that is new. A lot of the things that we referred to as AI in the past, we don't refer to as AI anymore because we've become accustomed to that technology. So in some ways, if we think about it, AI is what powers something like a spell checker. And it is something that has just grown in different ways in its own terms. Now, the other article that I picked up was an article that was about a science professor who had generated, I think, 4 or 5 different articles and had them published within a short space. He sent them out to peer-reviewed journals, but they were published one right after the other. So they were published in the space of about 4 or 5 months. So very quickly, all these articles came out, and then he said, I used ChatGPT to generate these. And it's ignited this sort of firestorm of conversation, whether or not this was the appropriate use of ChatGPT, whether this was a stunt, whether this was the future of academia. And those are all important questions, especially as we're thinking about our students, right, who might be using ChatGPT to get to a certain point, but then work with it further. So I will admit that my starting point when it comes to AI, my immediate associations with AI have to do with science fiction movies, like The Terminator. And I remember it was about a decade ago when I first, well, maybe more recent, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, when I first heard different computer and application generation being referred to as powered by AI. And for me, that was very strange when I first heard it because I always had this negative association with it. But it seemed like we had crossed that line, where suddenly this was the future, and it was empowering to say that it was being built with the help of AI. So those are my starting points, and I do think it is notable that we are thinking differently as a consequence of the technology that we use. So Bill, when you were talking about your daughter skipping from one song to another, I was thinking this is how many of our students read. So if we think about internet pages, as opposed to reading the bottom of the internet page, we've got all these links. And it's this hyperlinking that we do, is hypertextual reading. We don't necessarily finish something because we get to a point and we realize we're going to go somewhere else. And one of the things that I would offer along those lines, being a teacher, previously being a teacher of intro to journalism, is that most of the articles that are written in journalistic practice are written so that you can stop before you get to the bottom. You can only read halfway and it will still make sense. So it might not be as much of a radical departure, though I always do listen at the end of my songs. I will say that. So I'm wondering, just at the starting point, if you guys would like to elaborate on any of the things that you've encountered recently, and say a little bit more about the positive and negative associations that you have.
I had an encounter this week, if I can share my screen. So one of the things I do is work with our dual credit partners. And let me work on sharing my screen. Sorry about that. Share and that and that. Are you seeing my email up? There. So this week I got an email forwarded to me from our early college department from a high school instructor. She says, "Good afternoon, I'm having some problems with kids using AI, basically to write their papers. I've used 3 different AI detectors and come up with varying results." We know about that, don't we, Terry? Most of the time when I call kids out, they fess up, but I've also had a couple swear up and down that they did not use it. I do not want them using AI to write papers because they're learning how to write papers. My questions are, number 1, are you having problems on the college level or at the college level? What AI detectors are you using? And are there any that you have purchased to use in the English department especially? And what's your policy should you find a student used AI to write a good portion or all of their paper? I loved getting this email from a high school partner because a cheesy thing to say is we're all in this together, and I want to be a good link and support to these folks. I could either share what I wrote back, or we could just move on to other concerns, whatever you want to.
Let's start with some of those.
Yeah. So let's see. My response was, I hope gracious enough. Thank you for raising these important questions. There have been instances where AI has been used to cheat in my division. However, we do have some instructors leveraging AI to benefit student learning, trying to have a balanced approach. In my area, we've developed syllabus language to address how we will or will not be using AI. The statement from my current English 101 syllabus is as follows. I'll show you my syllabus in a moment. Artificial intelligence policy, and we can include this language in the module too, Terry. I think it might be a benefit. Use of AI is not permitted for composition or research in this class. Students using AI for composition or research in any work for this class will receive a 0 on that work. Receiving a 0 on a major paper will lead to a failing grade for this course. Decisions about rewriting papers, receiving the grade of 0 will be made on a case-by-case basis. So it's going to depend on their context, what kind of desperation were they experiencing, right? And how egregious was the use or misuse is the idea.
Various desperation.
Yeah, right. And I want to have that authority to figure someone out, right? If they're just being academically, intellectually lazy, that warrants a 0. If grandma's in the hospital and I couldn't get it done, that's a different conversation because I want to administer grades for grace is due. If we could have an honest conversation. On the use of the issue of AI detectors, I think we're out of luck. I took a course on AI higher ed over the summer. One of the exercises was to test several AI detectors, and the whole class got a bunch of false positives and an equal amount of false negatives. Terry and I can elaborate on that a little bit. Our academic dishonesty policy is being used for their cases of AI misuse. One of my approaches to handling AI misuse and plagiarism is to have students write their own academic honesty statement at the beginning of the semester. Moreover, I appeal to their ethical reasoning, and I try to help students understand the importance of having and developing their own personal and academic voice. This seems to have worked well this semester, as I've had no instances of plagiarism or AI use. So that was a fun thing that happened just this week, and a fun interaction. I'm happy to open the floor for further conversation or comment.
The younger students would be more prone to the use of it, to the use of the technology. So it's cool that it's starting from that level and then the conversation is being shared at this level.
Yeah.
I think it's important because it sets a precedent there that will lead into us. So glad that doors open.
Yeah. Good.
On the subject of emails like this, have you used ChatGPT to draft email responses to difficult questions? I was just curious, as sort of a meta exercise, you could run that email through ChatGPT and it would probably, generate a nice response.
Yeah. So my commitment has been to use my own thinking when I'm interacting with people. I do use ChatGPT on occasion for other things. And I don't mean to dominate, but I can show a couple of things that I've done recently. Share this window, share, where is that? It's one of these links here. And I would love to see how you guys are using it too. While Bill was talking, I asked ChatGPT to describe the process for underwater welding of a gas pipeline, explain the safety implications, and the physical preparation of an underwater welding. And I won't go through all that. It just stands to show that it will give you a good dose of information. And you know, I can send this query to you. I won't send it. I'm fascinated. I can't imagine welding while scuba diving is treacherous enough, right? Much less dealing with electricity, fire, gas, and pipes. So that was just a fun exercise. So I like you use it as sort of a check or something like this, or word check or something.
Well, I was using the predecessor.
Yeah.
But that is one of the ways you can take a text that you've already written and then suggest on these types of changes made. Because GPT, as well as being good at generating content, also really good at creating a sort of perspective or creating a voice for different sorts of content, which is actually one of the things that I wanted to mention. And course that we took. That was very primarily due to the community that we were part of. So the
Sorry,
course,
can I interrupt? We're getting microphone feedback. For those of us with a laptop open,
I'm muted.
I'm not sure why you're getting feedback. Sorry, I just didn't, if there was some way we could address it, I wanted to do that for them.
does everyone have their volume down?
I'm muted altogether.
No, I mean the volume down on the computer itself.
Check 1, 2.
Yep.
Okay.
But it was the course was fine. You know, it was structured in a basic way, but it was really the community that was very interesting to me because we had people when in my initial question about our comfort level, we had people who were very anxious about AI and very, very thrilled and excited about where it might lead. And we've already hit both primary areas where we would focus: student use and our own use. Right? Now, when it comes to the question that you asked, Cole, drafting the email, one of the things that I took away. So there are these various comments along the way that have just stuck with me. And one of the things that a person said, I don't remember if this was in a discussion board or one of the assignments, but they were saying that when they were drafting emails, they would run it through ChatGPT to make them fuller, more compassionate, and give more attention to student needs. Because their argument was, I have all of these emails to send. I send them out so quickly that I sound way too brusque. So I use ChatGPT to help me out that way. And that is completely unlike what we would expect, right? We expect ChatGPT to be there to generate the robotic version of an email, but this person was using it to build the empathy into it.
Can I jump on that and say I've used it in a similar way, but if there's some hesitancy to just allow anything that's sent out under my name to be written by a robot, or written by AI, a different way to do it is to enter in, particularly for an email that might be difficult, it would just be hard to read, whether it's some kind of corrective communication or something else, or sympathy or whatever it might be, where it's like, how do I word this so it's taken well? I have taken what I've written, put it into ChatGPT instead of sending it to, and I give like 1 or 2 sentences of the situation. That this person is in this situation. Describe for me the tone in which they might take this, or how would this be read? And then what are the ways that this might be misunderstood? And then it'll give me like, well, this sentence here sounds a little bit too aggressive, or this sounds like that. Consider changing it to these things. And I found that to be a very helpful way to do it too. So again, not letting it write it for me, but kind of give them enough about the person that's going to be receiving it to be able to then read it through their lens where I may have some kind of block in my mind because I'm thinking only from my perspective.
It's like you're using it as a tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Like this is
Exactly.
perfect, because instead of Google populating like a bunch of websites that you could look at for scuba diving and welding, it just kind of put all that information together for you very slickly, kind of like what you were doing there. So that's where I like it. And then, yeah, you worry about the overuse of it. So
Yeah.
concern. But that's cool. That's really interesting.
Sure. I'd like to get into some of the scary stuff that Dave is mentioning and running to student use to submit assignments. So early on with ChatGPT, some of the first queries I run, you see on your screen, write a feminist analysis of A Clockwork Orange, and it spit it out beautifully. Write a Marxist analysis of Clockwork Orange. So this is like a literary analysis that I would have students do. Write the above essay with a graduate level vocabulary, right? And so I had it morph into a more academic voice, and it did. And then, you know, one of the things we teach in composition is rhetorical analysis. I had it write rhetorical analysis of the BMW logo. And I showed this to my division last fall, about a year ago from today, really. And it freaked a lot of folks out because they would ask these kinds of questions. I had one instructor enter a philosophy question that she would ask her online intro to philosophy class. And she said, if I received this, I would say, that's brilliant. You did an awesome job. You answered everything exactly correctly, right? And so that was really, you know, a hard several meetings in a row that we had where we were just entering in queries.
How fast does it generate that? Because I
Immediate.
feel like
Second.
that's what I was, all of a sudden it dawned on me. I was like, wait, is this taking like 4 minutes or is this taking like less than 4 seconds?
Right, and then I said, provide a college level response for the essay above, and it decorates the language a bit more and makes a little bit more sophisticated sentence level and paragraph level constructs, you know. Yeah, so we did all kinds of queries just sitting in trainings together. I'll show you some of the fun stuff. Let me see if I can get, I have a friend in seminary who is working on exegetical work. And we did some of that work together. It actually broke down the Greek for him and did a lot of the work that his professors would have wanted of him. And it was fascinating to see. Let's see, I have some math stuff that it did. Let me see if oh yeah, my kid was in like a accelerated algebra for middle school, and he was struggling with exponential rules. And so we just entered in some things with him and helped him with his homework, you know, late at night. But then we, you know, my sons are both cellists, and we had ChatGPT writing melodies in B major for cello, and it gave instructions about how to do it. And then we had to write harmonies for that same melody. And then it did a bass line, and it wrote this whole musical piece. Oh, and then we did potato soup with bacon just for fun. But there's all kinds of things that we can do with it. My kids learned some coding in Minecraft. And so it actually will write code for different mods in gaming and things like that too. We had Trump do an Elizabethan English and iambic pentameter campaign speech just for fun. I won't read it, it's just silly stuff. I entered in a news article. Where is it?
You can give it a link and it'll go read it?
Yeah, it basically breaks down.
Not in ChatGPT.
Oh,
But,
Yeah.
for not the free version of ChatGPT,
gotcha.
but there are other similar sites that will.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it gives me
Rest of my
all
day.
the, you know, the bare basics of an article without having to read it. Yeah, we had it write an agenda. We didn't use it, but just showing that it can write agendas easily for us. My kid was trying to remember a grammar lesson, explain predicate nominative and provide examples. Now I knew what a predicate nominative was, but I was struggling to find examples for him. And here you go, right? So for that stuff, for quick learning doses, it's kind of like Wikipedia to me in a lot of ways. There are a lot of neat ways you can use it, right? There's a better, yeah, simplify exponent expression. There it is. That's what I was trying to find for Cole. You teach math, right? So my kid was really struggling with this, and we just entered that in, and it's right to simplify the expression. You could start by finding the value of each exponent, blah, 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 and it gives everything along with an explanation for a complex mathematical problem. To me, for homework where I wouldn't be able to explain that to my kid, that's legit use, right? Now there are apps kids are using for actual assessments that are scarier, and Cole, maybe you want to share about those a little bit. That's where I think pencil and paper is going to be essential, right? Not only can they, run this analysis on ChatGPT, but they can do it, right? That's where we're at. Any comments or questions? That's kind of my experience with ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's. Oh, go ahead. So.
Go ahead, Paul.
Oh no, I was just gonna say no. That's great. I've got a couple more use cases too. If after people have wrapped with questions on this, I can share my screen and show you just basically like one more new thing that it can do that I think is pretty cool and would be useful for everybody.
Sure. Let me share two more things and we'll get to that. This is my English 101 class. I just want to show that in the introductory unit, what I have students do is an academic integrity statement. We talk about academic integrity. We talk about AI. I let them know that hey, I know what that is, and there are uses for it. But I have them write a paragraph in which you explain your beliefs and standards with regard to academic integrity. And they submit that. It's for a couple of points, not a ton. But the purpose of that is to have them really reflect on what it means to be in school and thinking academically and thinking on their own. And it's a really good conversation because we just have a session where we talk about personal ethics. And it's a great way to have heart-to-heart early on in the semester. And, it's then if there is an instance, I have this on the books. I said, hey, you said this at the beginning of the semester. How do you reconcile this? Now, I haven't had to do that, all right? Let me share my syllabus with you guys real quick. And I do that by maybe stop sharing this one and then choose to share. I have so many things open, I apologize. Here it is. Here's my artificial intelligence policy and plagiarism policy. They're the same. I just use the word artificial intelligence instead of plagiarism. I include both to explicitly call out plagiarism versus AI use. In my classes, I don't allow any use of AI. We're just staying away from it. If you're going to allow some use of it, just reword that and say, for these instances, for quick doses of information on underwater welding or something like that, sure, that's great. Same with Wikipedia. We don't use Wikipedia for research and composition, but I don't mind. I like Wikipedia because I can rabbit hole on that stuff for hours on end. It's great information mostly, right? But I find having an explicit statement. This is where we landed in our workshop this summer. Our conclusion was let's develop statements versatile by being we don't have a college-wide statement at this point, right? So that's kind of my angle and where I've landed. And I will tell you, 100% out of 24 students this semester. I only have 24. You guys have a lot more because you teach multiple sections. But I've had 0 instances of plagiarism or AI. I've had a lot of bad student writing, but that's good because that's where we start in English 101 is with pretty raw bad student writing, right? And we develop from there. And so I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying, taking that face on, having some policies in place, having them reflect on their own policies seems to have been effective.
Cool. Well, and one of the things, one more reference to the group that we had in the ION course. It was my thought going in, and it turned out to be true that a lot of the high anxiety was being felt by people in the humanities who were very language-based in their assignments, and those who were excited tended to be in more technology-related fields because they saw different ways they could use it. So when it comes to those assignments that are language-based, one of the things that we found is that a lot of people just didn't know a lot about generative AI to begin with. I think we know a lot more about it, but at that time, particularly, I think ChatGPT was getting the lion's share of the media attention, so everyone was focused on basically this machine that seemed to be able to think for itself, though that's not really what it was doing. That's sort of the illusion it created, right? Because we would ask questions, it brought together artificial intelligence with the chatbot technology, so it seemed like we were talking to a person who was generating this in just seconds, but that's not how it works. It pulls on this information. And in relation to that, the stories that I've heard, both from individuals and from people who've written about generative AI in relationship to language, the best practices seem to be educated, to not pretend to your students like it doesn't exist. You have to start off with that acknowledgement with your students, because they know maybe better than many of us how to work through it, how to use it to a limited extent and how to work around it if they're thinking about using it for illicit reasons. But by the same token, there are ways that it could be built into a classroom. Now, I will mention that I did talk to a professor here at RBC who did run into a significant portion of our students who were using AI when they shouldn't have, using ChatGPT or something related to it. But even though we don't have checkers that can identify this, we have checkers that can identify plagiarism pretty well, because most often students just cut and paste from web pages. Not so much with ChatGPT. There's no good ChatGPT or AI checker out there. However, this particular professor had a very collaborative approach throughout the course. And so as soon as the students changed their topic and were writing in a completely different style, she could identify that, which is one of the things that is recommended, that you just work consistently with your students and understand who they are and their work. And then that will not necessarily be the huge problem that it might be that they're tricking us into giving them a grade that they don't deserve. One last thing in terms of the language-based use of it that I've heard is that people will bring it into the classroom in different degrees. Sometimes it will be to demonstrate, and we talked about this in the workshop, how if you look at some examples of work that's produced by ChatGPT, it does have a certain style, a sort of robotic style, right? And this is something that many compositional professors have brought into the classroom and said, let's ask ChatGPT this question, and then have analyzed what has been produced and found the ways in which it's been lacking. Okay, and that can teach two things. One is that it can teach that ChatGPT might not create that unique voice that you would often want in a composition class, but it can also show them how to use ChatGPT a little bit better. And I don't mean that in a wholly negative way. I don't mean that we're teaching them to be better cheaters. I mean that we're being more effective as people who ask questions. So that's one side of it. When it comes to, and I'll continue real quick, Carl. The only thing that I wanted to mention was the other thing when it came to other fields that has been intentionally used in other fields, such as the science fields, where professors have said when it comes to lab reports, they like to use it because they're not looking for a unique style in lab reports, but they can still give it a decent grade because it all depends upon how well they understand the information that they're putting in. And then the last thing, and this does come back to the ION course, there were IT professors who were saying that it could produce pristine code, which is really what they wanted from their students, and there was no way that they could tell that this was a problem. But they were saying, with this in place, we might be able to skip our 100 level courses and go directly to 200 level courses, the kinds of larger questions that we're asking in there. Sorry, go ahead, Carl.
That last summer I was at a comic book shop, I think it was in Missouri, but they had a little book that was written by ChatGPT as a demonstration. It was free, so I picked it up, and I was actually entirely unimpressed. That I was I had not played with ChatGPT at all. I tried playing with it about a year ago, but it was when everyone was trying to play with it, and it said, "There's too many people on us right now. You can't use us right now." Never picked it up again, but I'd read all these news articles. Like I follow the news more than I've actually used it, and I was expecting some pristine novel, interesting, unique, and it wasn't. It was very robotic, very stereotypical science fiction novel. So I was unimpressed. So I guess until we reached the AGI, I I'm not terribly concerned with AI, partially because my own classes, math has been dealing with photo math, which is essentially
Yeah.
AI for math for probably close to a decade, at least 5 years now. We've learned how to deal with that. And I also don't feel like from reading this book written by ChatGPT and actually published, there was no uniqueness to it, I guess, that it can only parrot back what it's seen before. So
Well,
that's my
and that
two
is,
cents.
that's a huge part in terms of the way that it functions, because
Yeah.
it's drawing upon the information that is out there. So when we're talking about generative AI, we're talking about GPT, it's generative pre-trained transformers, which takes the information that's fed into it and basically brings it together. So when we're talking about something that might seem very tight, that's because it is. You know, it's taking the majority of this information and putting it together. We can ask better questions and maybe make it a little less tight. But as a starting point, that's always going to be the case. So we ask it to write a movie script, which is the anxiety for all of those Hollywood writers who went on strike. Initially, it's going to look very much like the most basic action movie script that you can imagine.
This past summer, I received an email from Trump campaign, and I won't read it all, but it says, "I will never surrender," rhetoric and things like that. I asked ChatGPT to write this email in a more sophisticated, less dogmatic language. So I entered the email, and it tamped it down nicely, right? And it took out some of that dogmatic rhetoric. I asked it then to now write the original email with a less coherent, more dogmatic, and more hostile voice. And it writes, "Mark, the pathetic leftists keep coming at me with their damn witch hunts, trying to scare me and my family and my buddies into submission. But they don't know or who they're messing with. I'm telling you straight up, I will never surrender." It's really cool, I use that whimsically. I don't have a political dog in the fight, but Carl, to your point, it tempers language according to what we ask it to do. And so typically what students are going to do is ask it just a simple prompt, like write a multi-layer sophisticated argument in favor of Faroe Islanders hunting and eating whale. That's a topic I'm interested in. And it did write an essay. But Carl, it's exactly what you said. It's very synthetic feeling. I call ChatGPT voice, it's the Southwest airline flight attendant voice, right? When they're reading the safety procedures. And look, furthermore, another important point, finally, in conclusion, garbage writing, right? Now I can ask that to eliminate those transition words, use more sophisticated transitions. But most students who are going to use it this way, just like dump it in, and we're going to spot, right? But just be aware, we can change its voice pretty readily.
You can take that and you can just keep asking it to refine it over and over
Yeah,
and over
right.
more specifically, and it can.
It's like training an algorithm in a way.
Yeah, I guess.
So yes, what initially comes out of ChatGPT is very Southwest airline flight attendant voice, but we can morph it into a more seemingly personal kind of voice.
Well, and along those lines, one of the arguments, I attended a webinar a couple of weeks ago that was arguing for the use of AI apps in the classroom. And several of the people on the panel started off with the idea that if we don't train our students to use this technology when they get out there in the job search, they're going to lose those jobs to people who are trained to use these. So as far as the refinement goes, the refinement in using this technology, there's lots of different ways in which we can think about how to ask those better questions, how to train it in different ways. So train it for particular purposes, whether it be within the context of the classroom or whether it be in our own work, right? The things that we're looking for in our own work.
I guess I have one more thing to add, that yes, the language in the one I read was pretty basic, but so was the concept of the story. That it was basically mashing science fiction stuff together to create its own story. There wasn't a novel, interesting plot going on in the story. And I think that's more what I was getting to, is that it hasn't
Sure.
managed to create new stuff. And that's how it's programmed. It doesn't create new, it takes what it's had in the past and meshes it together. So
Yeah, it's all derivative.
Well, and that's it too, is that it can mash things together. I found that it's great at comparison contrast essays, though it tends to be a little bit over dramatic because it really wants to come to a positive conclusion. But yeah, I imagine it would be really good. There was a trend when it came to pitching movie scripts in the 80s and 90s. Everyone wanted to say, it's like this meets this. It's like Aliens meets Pride and Prejudice, right? It would smash two things together. And conceptually, that's probably something that AI can do. Would it be good or original? It wouldn't, right? Well, it might be good. I don't know. I might want to see Aliens plus Pride and Prejudice.
I think we focus a lot on the writing component of it. It has a lot of great tools that we can use, especially as instructors. And I would love to share some of those, but I know Cole, you mentioned that you use it. Are you using it to help with like your task for students or assessment? How are you using it?
Sorry, the most important part of that question broke up for me in the mic. So it was how am I doing? And then I couldn't hear you. And then, so what was that? Sorry.
I know you said you're using AI
Yeah.
in your class. How are you using it?
Yeah, so for one, I generate a lot of worksheets using a math typesetting software called LaTeX, which is more or less like HTML coding. You do some light coding and it creates a really nice worksheet. Well, ChatGPT is great at coding, and so you can say, hey, ChatGPT, I need a trig question on double angles, and type it sort of in plain text, but formatted in a copy-pastable LaTeX readable code, and it'll bam, do it and save me 5 or 10 minutes, and I can load it up into LaTeX, typeset it, and it looks great. Alternatively, it's a new thing on ChatGPT 4. You can upload your own data sets to ChatGPT now. And I have messed around with this with a Pumpkin Festival Committee bylaws document. So I've given ChatGPT the Pumpkin Festival Committee bylaws, and then you can ask it questions and say, hey, how do elections work? Hey, who can be a member, who can't? And so you're going to be able to use that to audit your syllabi, right? You can give ChatGPT your syllabi, say, read my syllabi, and then ask it, try to poke holes in your syllabus. Hey, how can a student get a late extension? Oh, I forgot to put that in my syllabus. So it can, read and audit your own work. And then just as a time-saving measure, if I need a list of 10 or 15 things as a sort of a brainstorming tool, hey, what are 10 topics to talk about what are 10 examples of an exponential function? Bam, there's 10 examples, pick the one you like. So sort of, I use it all the time. I'm not a frequent new tech adopter by any stretch, but this, I just felt like, to someone's point earlier, this is going to cause people to have, 30-40% increases in efficiency in all sorts of areas. And so I better figure out how, so that I can stay competitive.
So wait a minute. So maybe entering my rubric and then sending the students' work to it, would it grade it for me?
I haven't actually tried to get it to do that yet, but it can generate really slick rubrics. It can generate an amazing rubric if you give it, hey, I've tried with some early childhood development rubrics, because my mother-in-law is an early childhood development professor. And so I sat down with her and some of her assignments that she didn't have a rubric she really liked for. and we said, hey, I need, these 5 areas of focus, look like this, and then it generates you this nice table as a great starting point for a rubric, and you can go in and tweak it.
I've used it to generate rubrics as well. And I think the one thing that I have found, and that's why I asked you that, because I think we focus so much on the writing, and there are people who are like, well, okay, so I'm just checking plagiarism, but it's not. I mean, there are so many purposes that we can use it as a starting point. It's not something. Now, I've generated my criteria, give me a rubric, come out, and I love and take it perfectly. No, I never put something, asked for something, and used it exactly as it. And sometimes I put in something, and what it's given me, like I haven't even tweaked that to make it work with anything, but it's given me enough of a thought that I'm like, oh, this is the direction that I'm gonna go. And so when some of the tasks, I feel like oftentimes we do this long to do of things that are just like, it's only gonna take me a couple of minutes to do it, but I don't have a couple of minutes. ChatGPT is quickly able to give you starting points to go from. Like, yeah, it actually great your student work you asked it to. Yeah, and that, but it can give you, give me some questions. How do I assess learning in this area? Or so it will help with those kinds of things. And even on a personal, like I used it the other night. I grocery ordered the wrong thing and was like, what can I make with 6 cans of something I'm never going to use? And ChatGPT spit out several different lists of different recipes really quickly to try this. And so I think for those like, this is just for plagiarism, like students are reading papers, or I stay away from it. If you start just playing with it and putting questions, like I'm not really an early adopter to things, but I find myself, oh, I could ChatGPT that. And it gives you a start to go from.
Well, it's also, we have to remember that, because I think we create these negative associations with ChatGPT because we think this is the way that it could be used the wrong way. But it is a tool. It can be a very effective tool. And I think about the assessments, it might be able to generate a rubric. We might also be able to see how something would be assessed based on our rubric. And if it's not the way that we would grade it, that isn't necessarily a fault of the system. It might be a fault of our rubric. It can teach us quite a bit about what we're doing. Now, I know this relates to what you've been doing, Peter. So
yeah, I'd like to take a little bit of your time and show you a resource I put together for you, as well as just some of the ways I've incorporated it into my workflow. And so my goal a little bit has been to put this together in a way that is actionable for you and gives you some things to truly try. And so I spent, so let me just pull this up here. So in the Eagle course that Terry put together is a link, and it goes to this little, I guess you could call it a little website I put together. It's not fancy by any stretch of the imagination, but it does just provide, this is basically like an interactive PowerPoint here, so it gives you some things to click around on. So I won't bother reading the little intro thing, but I did want to show you a few of the different resources I have here, and that just kind of give an example of what I'm using. And I'm going to hop around, not go in order, but just to make you, all of this is available to you to go through and click around later if you want to do more. So I'm going to jump right to how some of the ways in which I use this from a work standpoint. And so I do a lot of analysis and synthesis with this in my role as an administrator at the college. And so some of the things I've done have been just comparative analysis. So for example, I had 2 different truck driver training job descriptions in we just kind of had to clean up some job descriptions within the department. And I really was having trouble even figuring out what's the difference between these two. I was able to throw it into, one of these AI programs and basically just copy paste the job descriptions and then asked it to please compare them and help me understand the differences. So I did that, and it gave me, it gave me a whole set of bullet points. Whoops, I don't want to move things around. It gave me a whole set of bullet points of all the things that are different between the two position descriptions, which gives me a launching point to start to say, all right, now I need to make them line up because we really don't need both of these within the same program. Just as a way of like, I can do the grunt work and I can take half an hour and I can print them out side by side, use my highlighter, do all of that. Wouldn't I rather have it just tell me the differences and then I can make the educated decision on whether I want A or B or I want to blend them together. So that I think that's an example of where you're not doing it. It's not doing my work for me. It's just getting me to the point where I, the human, need to engage. It's just getting me the information.
Is this ChatGPT you're using?
I didn't use it for that one. I used Bing for that one.
Oh, this is Bing, okay.
But and I'll go through some of the other ChatGPT alternatives in a moment. When I first started here, I wanted to just see how my position description aligned with Rock Valley Strategic Plan. So I put both of them in there and asked it to give it to me, basically break all my job responsibilities into the 4 pillars, just to see how my job lined up with what the college's goals are, which again, I just found as a helpful tool as I'm acclimating myself to the college to see how that lines up. So again, you think about this from, you don't have to do job, I spent a lot of time with job descriptions and whatnot, but you could do this with all kinds of different projects that you're doing. You just ask it to compare a foundational document to this. You could even say, you could take your syllabus and then take a big final exam and say, please compare my final exam to all the topics I covered in my syllabus and see if I've left anything out, or see if I've spent too much time in my exam focused on one of the topics in my syllabus rather than another. Would be, those are ways that you could do some of this comparative work. Combing through large volumes of data, those are just some links to some resources, but now ChatGPT in particular on the paid side, which I'll show you in a moment because I've got a paid subscription, that really has unlocked a lot of power. But that is really helpful if you want to upload, a 100-page PDF, like you had mentioned, somebody had mentioned, put that in and then start asking questions of it, and see what am I able to do, or what does this say, or can you find examples of this within this document? So that's all there as well. I used ChatGPT heavily in the creation of the strategic plan for our tech bus. And again, it was not, it would generate some suggestions, but really writing a strategic plan, I just said, all right, first, I described here's the tech bus program, here's everything I know about it. Now give me the outline of a strategic plan. It gave it to me, here's 9 points of a typical strategic plan. Great, point 1. All right, what questions, and this is how I approach a lot of bigger projects. I basically have it mentor me, coach me through the process. So if I'm starting with a blank sheet of paper and I've got this giant project I have to put together, usually it's strategic related in my role, but you can do this with anything. And this is a great thing. If we're thinking about how do we teach students to use this effectively, this is a really good way to do it. You say, all right, you've been given a research paper and it needs to be, 20 pages long. You have to have 15, 4 primary sources and everything else, whatever. You're doing that. Instead of having the student say, write my research paper, you say, well, have it coach you, apply it how you want. You may not like this, I'm not an English teacher, but the idea that you could say, I will go in and say, all right, what are the key components of a strategic plan? Great, here's my 9.1. What questions do you need me to answer to be able to write the first page? Well, I need you to answer, what's the mission and vision? Who is it serving? Why do they want it there? How is it effective? What has it done in the past? So I'm doing all the cognitive work. I'm putting it all in, and then basically what it does is takes all my words, jumbles it up, and then puts it together in a format that's typical for a strategic plan. And then I go through and I make my edits. Same thing for, okay, now let's go to step 2. Page 2 is this. Now help me, so all of those kind of things, I just ask it, what questions do you need me to answer in order to, provide me a draft? And so I have actually learned a lot about various things I'm working on because it asked me really good, deep questions, and then I have to do that mental work. It's just taking the word salad that I throw at it and it's turning it into something that I can revise. So again, I don't think it's actually doing the work. It's doing some of the hard, boring part of crafting a draft. From that point, I can actually go through and generate. You may disagree, but I feel like that's been a really helpful way for me to approach large projects, is breaking it and having it break down for me. This was another thing, we talked about, and I won't show you much because this was something we already discussed, but tone analysis. I just did an example here. If you were a professor and you wanted to leave a note on a student's essay, obviously this would be a terrible note to leave here, but your essay on mental health was depressing and disturbing, you should cheer up and not be so negative, right? I mean, that would be awful to leave in a student's thing, but you can say, describe the tone and what suggestions would you say so that the point of it gets across, but it's done in a more professional way, and it can do some of that. So again, you're providing the content, but it does, but it'll go in and, how do I go back here? It'll go in and help you adjust that. Oh, I see what happened. All right. And then as far as like straight on content analysis, Google Sheets has gotten into the game too, or all of Google has. So that's a little bit of how I do it as far as projects are concerned. Let me just show you a few more things, and I won't read everything I put on here for you. I just want you to have some resources. When it comes to just searching, here's how I approach getting information using these models. So previously, I was working on a grant proposal to get some virtual reality on our tech bus. And if I were to search it, I'm looking for what are the best VR systems for educational use. If I do Google search, I'm going to click around on every article online that says, here are the 8 best VR systems in 2023. And then it's all paid because, those companies paid to be listed as the top 8. What I want to do is I want to see user reviews. I want to see, what do people say on Reddit? What do people say in places where they don't get paid to have an opinion? But that's really hard to search. You take a lot of time. So instead of digging through a bunch of clickbait articles to try to find something helpful, I can have a conversation with ChatGPT or whatever and basically iterate. So then I say, all right, what are the 8 best systems? It gives me answers. Then I say, all right, now how can I, and I outlined this all there on the things, so you can look at it later, but I say, all right, I like this idea of cordless versus corded. So show me 8 cordless ones. Great, I like this. Now my price point is more in this range, so start to narrow that down. All right, look at user reviews on Amazon. Which ones have the highest stars? What are the major complaints for this set? And you just do that over and over, and eventually that gets me to a point where I've got a really true, genuine product for me to consider a lot faster. Google has started incorporating this into their search features. I don't know if any of you have turned that on in Google, but it'll, when you search, it'll also give you an AI-generated answer. And that's, that's been pretty interesting.
In terms of user reviews, I noticed that Amazon is using that in terms of.
Yes, I saw that too.
It summarizes all of the user reviews into one short review.
Yep. Problem is, those user reviews aren't mass written by AI anymore.
So cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
I know. Yeah, you get to work around. All right. One thing to consider is that Google Chrome, if you use that as your browser, has a number of extensions. This is an example of, I don't know, I have 3 or 4 on here, but there's millions of them. But there are some really cool ones that you can put. You can just have an extension, just like I'm sure you all use extensions on Chrome. And so I like some of them. Perplexity's one where it has a summarize button, so I can pull up and say a blog post I want to read, but it's it's 1,000 words long, and I just want to get the gist of it. Hit summarize, and it'll give me a paragraph, and I'll say, oh, that's good enough. I want to read this, or I didn't really need it. Those are kind of some nice things. But again, if you want, take some time, dig into some of these things. I did want to show you a few new things. So the college, I twisted the college's arm hard enough that they gave me a paid subscription to ChatGPT. So and I would say, so prior to this fall, it's been like adding a supercharger to a car. It's just made things faster, better, and a little bit more interesting.
Kim has a budget.
But I would say since this fall, the paid subscription to ChatGPT now went from putting a supercharger in a sedan to now just getting straight on Lamborghini. It's amazing what this thing can do. So I want to show you a few of the unique things for the paid side of it. Whether you can convince the college to pay for yours or not, it might be worth $20 a month for you to pay for it for yourself, because it is just it's incredible. So here's some of the things it can do. One is custom instructions. And I think you can actually do this even on the free version of ChatGPT. You can now tell it, it asks you 2 questions. And this is a global thing for every conversation you have. What would you like it to know about you to provide better responses? And you can decide how you want to do that. And it gives you some thought starters. Where are you based? Where do you work? What are your hobbies? What subjects do you talk about for hours? What are your goals? So it keeps that in mind in every answer it gives you. And then it asks you, how would you like it to respond? Formal, casual, short or long, call me by my first name, whatever you want it to do. And every answer will follow those rules. I've spent an inordinate amount of time hacking those things so that now what I get is highly relevant, not generic, cheap answers. I'm getting really, really well-crafted responses to my questions in the way that I need it. So that I think might even be free on ChatGPT now. They've rolled that out to everyone. But that one is worth taking the time to spend some time in. Plugins are pretty cool, and I'll show you what those look like. So plugins are essentially apps within the program. So there are, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of apps for these plugins that you can now incorporate into ChatGPT, and you can basically call on it to access those, and it'll use it. So it expands its capabilities. So we all kind of know that these models don't really do math very well. And there are some really funny examples online of when math, it takes simple math problems and totally botches it. But you could add, just as an example, you could add the Wolfram Alpha plugin, which if you ever use Wolfram online, it's a really powerful scientific, basically like a search engine for science and scientific notation and whatever else. And so you can basically ask them now complex math things or science things, and then say, please access this plugin. And it'll go to that site, it'll do all of that hard data work, and then kick it back out in a simple language for you. And you know it's going to be accurate. There's so many things you can do with this. Prompt perfect's kind of cool because you can, if you just type the word perfect before the prompt, and then you just say, tell me about the Earth. That's a stupid question, but it's too broad. So it'll narrow that down, and it'll take that one sentence and make it a paragraph asking much more specific information that then allows you, that gives you a better answer. So it'll just craft your questions better. I won't go through much more except to say that the plugins are kind of cool to check out. This one just rolled out last week, 2 weeks ago, custom GPTs, and this is where I think I think what somebody online mentioned, I think they're already using this. Jonathan, I think it was you.
It was me, the bylaws, yeah.
This is wild, and I wanted to take a bit of time to show you an example of a custom GPT I built. So this is where you get to create you're basically creating your own ChatGPT. So you're telling it, here's the information I want you to know. I'll actually show you the guts of it first. So you name it, you give it a description, you give it instructions. So what is it supposed to do? What do you want this to do? How do you want it to respond? What are the important things that you should keep in mind? How, all of that stuff. And then give it some conversation starters that somebody can just click on to get started. But the power is knowledge. You drop in a bunch of documents, and then it can refer to those directly and answer your questions. So for this one, I built one for our truck driver training program, and it's the CDL mentor. So right now, we require people to get their CDL permit before they start our program. We give them a big packet, a 60-page practice test, and we say, good luck, go to the Secretary of State or go to the DMV, go take your test. And you have to pass it before you come, and some people struggle with that. So I've uploaded the study guide plus a bunch of other documents straight from the Secretary of State website. And now people could hop on this and they could chat with it. So for example, we could start with just guide me through the documentation requirements, because it's pretty tricky to go and get your CDL from a logistical and paperwork standpoint. So now that it has all this documentation, it'll go through and it'll give you, just a list of everything you need. And I may not even let this finish talking. I just want to show you what it can do. But I can now have a conversation with basically it's my own private DMV person, and I can ask them everything they need. It'll give it to me straight from what they have on their websites. But when I designed this specifically because I want it to be a quiz coach. So quiz me on the practice test topics. Not practice is the wrong one. It probably should have said permit, but it'll get the idea. So now I can just go through and do an endless amount of practice questions that'll help me so that now I can go take the test, and I'll be set to go. You can do multiple choice, fill in the blank, whatever. But these GPTs are pretty incredible as far as being able to train it on a specific data set. So again, thinking about use in the classroom, you can create one of these. Now the trick is you have to have a paid account to access this too. So there's a barrier there that eventually will come down. You could put in a bunch of data or a bunch of papers or a bunch of something in a class and then say, all right, now we're going to interact with this. We're going to upload a primary source document that's 1,000 pages long. And we're now going to interact with it, ask it questions and dig into it. Tell me more about this and find somewhere in here that it addresses this question or how it, and now you can start to work with it in that way. So super powerful. I would recommend spending some time with that if you have a paid subscription. And it also integrates all of, so then it used to be where if you wanted ChatGPT to talk to you about image creation, you could click on that and you could make images for you. But then if you wanted it to search the web, you had to click a different tab. And if you wanted to do data analysis, a separate tab. Now they roll it all into one. So now all of the power's in one spot. And now it can do pretty cool things. This is just one example. I'll show you. This is a little bit more on the goofy side, but just again, from the power of what it's able to do is now image recognition. So my wife has the nice handwriting. She wanted me to make chicken while she was out one night. So she gave me what I needed for the sauce. And then she told me, like, as she's walking out the door, okay, oven 375, this many minutes, and then, first fry it and then do this. And so I like sketched it out really fast. And I was like, man, I don't even know what my own handwriting meant. So I took a picture of it and I just asked it, put the recipe for tahini chicken into a traditional recipe format. I mean, it read through all of my crazy handwriting and it gave me a perfect recipe. And then I said, turn it into a PDF. So it did, and I downloaded the PDF, printed it, and there I go. I'm working with the recipe. But I mean, I think what's amazing is the capability of turning this into something. It can read that. So think about a little bit on the dark side. Students can take a picture of a science problem or a graph or even an image or even a picture that if it's an art history class, like do an analysis of this painting based on X, Y, and Z. The student could take a picture and say, exactly what you asked me to do, and it'll look at the picture and it'll do all that work. So it's pretty powerful in what it's able to do from a visual standpoint.
I was immediately thinking of like when we talk about OER. I've tried OER and I kind of went away from it because it just didn't come with all the bells and whistles the publisher gives you, like a test bank, and not all of them, but some of it doesn't come with a test bank, doesn't come with all these things. And if you upload the OER into this thing, you could create a test bank.
Yes.
You could create cookie discussion, you could do all that stuff.
Those are the things that I think are valuable for it.
Yeah.
Not grading your papers, but creating your test, right?
Yeah. Or analyzing your test to see if it really is as good as you think it is.
It will create PowerPoints as well.
In terms of the organization, the recipe example, I think of how often students will take a picture of the whiteboard on the way out, but then, they let it go for a week and they forget, what was going on with all these arrows going to different places. And if you had AI to analyze that and put it together in a reasonable form, then it would make sense to you.
To do that on the way out the door by the time you look at it again.
Or you could do it for them and then send them the PDF.
Right.
That too. A couple more quick things to show you. There's more in here to play with. I do want to talk about the importance of using prompts. And this is where it goes from the generic AI written, first, then in conclusion kind of language. I've gone really far down the rabbit hole of prompt engineering, where you basically are creating prompts that will get you exactly what you want. And I'll just use image creation as an example, just because it's easy to see. But if you can go to their image creations, side, and if you put in a lot of really carefully detailed and crafted language, you can get pretty cool stuff. And by cool, I just mean specific. You can get exactly what you want. So the point is to show off, look at this cool thing I made, but rather to say, look at the detail in this, then allows you to get like a cool adult coloring page, or if I'm looking for more technical or high resolution stuff, again, I've included the prompts in all of these just to show, it's not just like, show me a picture of dragons and a ship. but like be very specific about what you want. It can,
How long did it take to generate that? Like if you.
it takes about 2 minutes or a minute. You know, you can get photorealism. I mean, you can get stuff that's, you know, but again, you have to ask it the right way. And the point of this isn't to say how to do that, but I just want to show you that there's capabilities here of generating things if you know how to ask it the correct way. It does this with language too, not just images, but images are kind of a quick visual like hit for you to see that. When it comes to some of the other options to you, if you don't want to pay for the ChatGPT extra thing, Bing Chat is good. It's through Microsoft. And if you got to go through the Edge browser. So you would click on that, and then I bookmarked it, but it's just their chat. And then if you click on the creative button, it uses the same GPT-4 that ChatGPT does. So you can do that for free. I think ChatGPT has worked in a bunch of other features that make it worth the money, but that's separate. Google's got Bard, so they're doing their thing. That's also free. ChatGPT, Google Docs has AI embedded into it now. You may have noticed that. And this is to be aware of too. I found this article, students will find this out too. I found a whole article on how to teach ChatGPT to write in your own voice. So now it's no longer this robotic thing, but they can upload a bunch of their previous writing and say, and through this, you know, this is just an article worth reading later about analyze my writing and then use that analysis to now write this for me. And it's going to sound like that student wrote. If they have weird turns of phrase they use, if they use grammatical mistakes, it'll mirror all of that so that it feels like they wrote it. So we're past the point where you can, if you're not noticing things that look AI written, it could be either people aren't doing it or they've figured it out and can get it to write as they would have done it and you would never know.
That's one of the things that I heard from a professional writer this last summer is she's pretty widely published, so her information is out there, and that's what she do. She'd create a rough draft, and then she'd say, write in the style and fill in her own name.
Yeah, yeah. If you're a professional writer and your stuff's out there, then it can do that.
So that's a question that I actually had for you, David, when we went around and did introductions, and you said, you know, you have a lot of people that have used it.
Mm-hmm.
What is your approach with that then, right? Like, how do you know, are you docking students? Are you talking to students? But because, as we've already discussed, the issue is we can't say, copy a piece of this from Google, look, it's right here.
Yeah.
So how are you approaching that?
Well, first of all, Peter just blew my premise right out of the water because I've been using, yeah, thanks. I've been just like when Mark described the vanilla kind of, first of all, ChatGPT always gives points, bulletized points as an answer. And so when I've noticed that the students use the exact same points in the exact same order, and then if they use certain phrases that are, you know, they won't use the whole sentence. They'll just use like, you know, just like the last 4 words of the sentence or something like that, but it'll still be in there. So they've edited the first part of the sentence. So all of those are indicators to me like, okay, this is ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I did not address it specifically in my syllabus. So I've come up with the approach of, I basically don't hit them the first time. I just say, hey, pretty sure you use ChatGPT. And if you think I'm wrong, let's have a discussion about it. No one's ever taken me up on that. No one's ever taken me up on that. And then on the second iteration, I just give them zeros, and I have been giving zeros now. And I suspect that also may be a product of, I'm not sure students are reading the feedback I'm giving them either. Like, they may not know I should put a shot over the bow, but you know, so I don't know, like, why would you keep doing this? If I told you I know you're doing it, you know?
Right.
But that's the approach
Because they're
now.
still smarter than you.
Well, I probably.
But
The
we
next
are-
semester will be a different.
Okay, so going back to the ancient times of the internet, that's what I've had students do is I've had them wholesale copy something and then they cut and paste 3 different things together and they think I won't notice that.
Yeah.
But same way, you know, it's just a matter of using the tools more effectively. They're trying to master the use of the tools.
Yeah, and they do think that they're smart, you know,
Yeah.
like.
If I'm going to take a shot in predicting the future here, I think we're 1 to 2 semesters away from students, even less.
Yeah.
For students learning how to engineer a prompt in a way that it is not vanilla AI,
And I won't be able to
and
see
you're
it.
not gonna be able to tell. Because here's what's happening. If you follow the right people on Twitter or X, whatever, or other sites, and I do a lot of following AI stuff on there because I think it's interesting. People now, what's popular is now sharing prompts. Because when you've worked for an hour or two to get the prompt just right, then you can share it with somebody else, they can use it and they can tweak it for their purposes. And so now I actually have in my notes folder on my computer, I have prompts that I have saved that I have worked on and I've seen from others that is really powerful. Like everybody really ought to start a folder in their computer that is prompts that I want to keep, because it's really, really, really amazing and powerful. So students will do it. They will start sharing prompts. And especially if it's a generic class, I think of high school, like AP classes, where every AP class is the same around the country. You know, you have AP US history, and they all know they have to cover this topic, and there's usually this kind of question, and somebody's going to write a prompt that is going to answer that essay question. And they're going to share that out in whatever social media they want to use, and now someone's going to copy paste that prompt, and it's no longer going to be vanilla. It's going to be exactly what the AP board would want to see, that kind of thing. So students will be sharing prompts with one another rather than sharing answers. That's the way they'll cheat, is to say, here's a prompt that's going to get you the right answer, not here's the answer that you need to write down.
And I'd also say that the in-class writing would be a great approach, like back to old school, but it doesn't work for online classes. That's where I see most of it. And
Almost have to write it down, take a picture, upload it as like a file.
yeah,
Honor lock. So, right, we haven't come up with a plagiarism checker that works well. But in terms of our testing solution, Honor Lock is available, and they, they'll lock down browsers, and they even, because students have to download that extension, it will even, for people who are like Apple users, it will know if you're using your phone at the same time. And so you could start using Honor Lock for even writing assignments that, hey, this writing assignment is open from this date to this date. And you must use Honor Lock to write it.
yeah. But another thing in online classes that they haven't figured out yet, but clearly they're going to in a semester or two, is that they don't know who else is putting the exact same prompt in.
Yeah.
So when I get 5 exact responses, I'm like,
But it's not going to be the same response.
it's not gonna be the same response now.
One thing to consider is that in Google Docs, it shows version history. And so you can see, it'll timestamp the document that's been written. So if somebody actually wrote it, you'll see 8:10 p.m., 8:11 p.m., 8:12 p.m., and it'll show you when these sentences were written. And if you can see they spent 45 minutes on a prompt, on a question, and you can see revisions and deletions and all of that, you'll be able to tell they did it. If 8:10 there was nothing there, and 8:11 there was everything there, then it was copy pasted. Whether it was cheated, somebody lifted it off the internet, or whether they had it from ChatGPT, you can still see it was there, and then it wasn't, and then it was. And that's been really effective working with students at my previous institution. I say, hey, look, here's the version history of your document. How did this appear in 1 minute? And that's usually where they'll confess. But I can also look it up and say, you spent 45 minutes on this. I think unless you sat there and typed out, which nobody's going to do, you might as well do the work then.
Well, and as I think about my own experience as a professor, the writing course that I would teach most often was always a writing 102 class. It was a research writing class. The end result was always a 15, 20-page research paper. And everything in the class would be built towards those ends. And so if I were to teach it now, I definitely would use ChatGPT or other AI tools along the way as part of the process. Because my design was always, I would always have essays that built towards that one essay. So summary paper, synthesis paper, analysis paper, they could use all that material, right? They were gathering along the way, creating bibliographies, and I was always working with them. And the one way that I thought in particular that it seemed to would have served a purpose for my students is that inevitably I would find students hitting a roadblock at different points in the process. So one of the things that I mentioned before to Kim, when we were talking about neurodiversity, when I had students who were on the spectrum, they had trouble generating topics. they just couldn't get started. And so if ChatGPT were available to them, I would say start there.
Yep.
Because they're great with form, because they understand what it means to write a synthesis paper. I would give them the form and they know, but it's hard for them to get started. Other people have a difficult time with the research. So I think if I were to do it, I would say, okay, here's where I want you to turn to ChatGPT, and I want you to share that information with me, and we'll analyze it together.
Yep.
Because typically that's what we would do along the way.
I
Also,
think-
as a-
I-
listen to the-
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah,
I guess I have a question and a comment. Question for Peter first. You had mentioned that Google Docs has the timestamp for different writing. For math, we don't really have that, but for their online courses, we can see how long they spent on a single problem. And
Yep.
so we have some students who are going to spend 10 seconds on a question that takes 2 minutes for us to do. And I guess the question for you as an administrator is, if we notice a student taking a test spending 10 seconds on a 2 or 3 minute question, we would have a strong suspicion they are doing something dishonest. Would the administration support us if we filed the academic dishonesty report in that instance?
I
My
won't
colleagues
speak on
would say
behalf of
no,
your
but I
dean.
don't know
so-
for sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't speak on behalf of your dean, but I would say if you can use that and other evidence to show that there's a pattern, it would be worth, I think that would be something that would be considered, by the administration as something, we're all trying to figure out how to support you in the daily work of teaching the students. And so we want to support you in catching dishonesty so that students are actually learning. And I would say that's one great way to do it. So I guess I can't talk to your dean, directly, but I think that that's anything that's close to hard evidence is great. And so if you can use that, if you have some numbers attached to anything, that's really helpful in at least having that discussion with the student.
Okay,
Carl,
thank you.
you raise a great point that I should have said I didn't think of when I said about honor lab, that you can in Canvas as well tell how much time and when
Yeah.
students
Yeah.
are using it. I mean, I've used that quite a bit for students when they're like, the professor didn't give me enough time, or really, because I see you spent 3 minutes, or,
Right.
you
logged on at 11 o'clock at night before it was there.
Yeah, so you can see how much time they've spent on things, but, to Peter's point, if you've got that information, Dean Huntley and your dean are here to support academic honesty,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so much of this is like, it's digital ethics, it's teaching them to be responsible. And so it's a learning process, and yes, you will be supported if you could say, hey, I see that you are spending less than a minute on a problem that would take me 20 minutes to do. How are you doing this? Dean Huntley is going to support you in that. She's not going to be like, oh, there's that Carl again, failing all of these students for no reason. Carl hates
What if it's Google
students,
hunting?
right? So, if you know that a student is cheating,
Yeah.
you will be supported in that.
But that's part of it, right? What if it is goodwill hunting? And that's the thing is you can actually sit down and have that conversation. That was a huge step for me in my early life as a professor, realizing that this was part of the learning process, right? You said that in terms of using these digital tools. When my students plagiarized, that wasn't the end for me. It was like, and they plagiarized and I said, you're dead to me. I had to use this as an opportunity for them to learn from the experience. And so same way with digital tools, how do you use them ethically? I mean, we have to learn how to use tools ethically. I teach my kids, you can use that shovel to dig a hole, but not hit your brother over the head. There's certain ways that you use these in the right way. So, and certain ways that we use them in the right way too, I think, and can use them effectively. In terms of generating content, one of the first things that I thought is that I know that along the way, in certain courses, there's been times where I thought, I need to teach this, but I'm not sure how. An outline for a lesson would be great. And I love the example that you gave about analyzing course objectives. You know, to see, are all these objectives that I'm supposed to be hitting represented in my content? Because, you know, sometimes I just go through a course and I assume that it is that way because I have a general idea, but I don't necessarily go back and map it out. Yep.
And I think in terms of, you know, I mean, those are things that we can use it for, but in terms of teaching students too, I think we've made mistakes over the years, right? We've given children phones and we've allowed them to, you know, when children tell their parents, you can't touch my phone, there's something very wrong with that. We've gone away from teaching basic like typing and word processing, and so students are like finger typing because we assume that they're these digital natives and they know everything. They don't. They know how to use their own, you know, they know how to game or look up what they want to do. And so they're looking at ChatGPT or other AI generators as, this is so cool. Look, it'll do my homework. And so we have to be able to give them the proper tools, just like we're learning, like, hey, here's how you could use it as an instructor or in your personal life to help make your systems easier, to tell students like, yeah, it can do your homework. That's actually cheating, but you don't know what to write your paper on. Well, let's put in what the criteria are and it'll help you get some topics. And so teaching them the proper way to use it will be helpful. Like I love your assignment, Mark, of, you know, write me your own academic honesty statement.
Yeah.
Because that's going to tell you too a little bit like, I don't want to talk for this student, you know, like, right? Like, they're a little like,
They were all pretty different, honestly.
yeah. So like, I mean, we have to be able to have the conversations.
Yeah.
You know, being able to say, I'm pretty sure you used this.
Yeah.
Let me know if you didn't.
But the thing that I love about the assignment too is you get to the why. Like, why don't you do this? Or why do you do this? Because typically, you know, when we encounter a policy, it's just, you know, you do this or you don't do this, right? And there's a rationale behind it, but the students are not always clear on that.
Can I just finish really quickly and show two last things, 4.5 minutes. I just want to let you know that this is in there, so you can turn to it. I'm not going to walk you through it. One is what's up and coming. This is as I've just followed the news and what's happening. There's other stuff too. So X or Twitter has just released an AI. It's behind a paywall, so you have to pay for some subscription. I've not used it. I can only afford so many subscriptions, but Grok is what they've called it, and it's trained on all the content within Twitter. Which, once you get through all the hatred and awfulness of Twitter, you know, right? There's a lot of really, really good stuff. If you follow the right people, Twitter can be. I use it as professional development. I mean, I just so many smart people post things on there. So I don't know how they train all the hate out of it, but essentially it's trained on. So I think that's.
Well, but maybe that's you build your own, right?
Yeah,
Same
yeah.
way I build your own.
Right, and so one of the things I think this will be the business path for companies is if you own a large amount of data like Twitter, then you're going to make your own AI that will comb through that. And now if people want access to all of the knowledge that lives in there, you have to pay for their AI. And you're going to start to see that with all kinds of other companies that own data sets. So that's coming up. Apparently Grok has a fun mode, so it gets really snarky on you. I don't know. Microsoft Copilot has been rolled out recently. So on all the Microsoft tools, there is a AI Copilot that will now integrate with Outlook and Word and Excel and all that stuff. I do not believe our college has access to it. I'm sure that there's security features why our IT hasn't turned that on because they don't want, we have educational data that's not supposed to be sent out to the wild. And so I don't think, I can't find it anywhere on any of my apps, but it is out there. So you're going to get, again, Google, Microsoft, others, they're going to start to integrate AI into all the software we already use. We don't have to go out to ChatGPT. It already lives in Word or Outlook. So that's happening. And then Meta, which is Facebook's parent company, is working on their own version called Llama. Right now they're on Llama 2. I'm sure they'll hit 3 soon, but it's open source. So their goal is, hey, instead of making this proprietary, we want to put this out to all the engineers of the world and let you guys tinker with it and see if we can make this better. So different ways that people are going about it, just something to be aware of. And then lastly, this is a resource I didn't create, but I wanted you to have it. I had to subscribe to somebody that sends me emails every day to get it. This link should work for everybody if you click on it, but it takes you to basically their AI starter kit. And what I found in here, besides it just explaining, help me learn what ChatGPT is, help me learn how to prompt, what are some practical applications, and then what are some use cases, for learning, teaching, coding, marketing, etc. What I really like too it's got over 1,000 copy-paste prompts. I talked about collecting the best prompts, so they've done some of that. There's a bunch for education. So you could just, here's a plagiarism checker, which I don't know how relevant it is anymore, but you could copy-paste this, and you can tell in every prompt what part you need to put in personally. Copy-paste that, put it in. It's been tweaked so that you're going to get the result you want. So there's over 1,000 of those prompts in here. So I just dropped it in as something to play around with. Step 7, they're going to highly promote their own stuff, but that's how that works. So I just wanted to leave everybody with stuff they can click around with afterwards if they're interested. But that's cool. So that's it for me.
This is on our Eagle course?
This is on the Eagle course.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I wonder if I could pull that up. Yeah, it's on the Eagle course, so find out later.
This is not specific, but the thing that I've heard consistently when it comes to the field of education in terms of the future is that AIs are just going to be designed to do automated grading and adaptive assessments and automatic tutoring much more effectively, which is kind of exciting. Again, going back to the building a good rubric and having AI take a look at that, or maybe actually score something based on that rubric. I can't count the number of times that I've heard a professor joke, I would do this for free, but they have to pay me for grading. And we have to recognize that in the grand scheme of things, in some cases it's already farmed out. And I'm mentioning that because my daughter goes to the U of I, so she goes to these classes with 300 other of her closest friends, and that's the only time she sees her professor. And then, her work is entirely evaluated by grad students who very often are not very well trained at what they're doing. And I think about this, I think about the fact that we can train AI to do things. We're not there yet, but I think very soon we might be, right? Where it could effectively do something like that. So there's that. And I love the idea of creating your own GPT because at the very beginning of this faculty development day cycle, I created a new committee with faculty members, and I created that folder with all these things that we should have in mind. And of course we don't think about all of them. It included the strategic plan, it included the academic strategic plan, it included professional development goals, included HLC criterion 3 and 4. Like all of these things that we should have in mind, but we create some way to put all those together in GPT and have that guide some of the things that we're doing.
It is a guy opener today.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, this is cool. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
This is a good one.
Any other thoughts or comments for the good of the cause as we come to a close?
Go ahead, Carl.
Go ahead, Carl.
I guess just thought I just started having is, I know there's concerns with the data privacy, and we didn't discuss that a whole lot today, so that could be another discussion at some point. And I also wanted to touch on Kim's comments about not all of our students being digital natives. I very much noticed that when I was trying to use HonorLock this semester, that the first test, I would say almost everybody had problems with HonorLock. And probably a third of my class chose willingly decided I want to take my test in the testing center instead of online because I don't feel comfortable with the technology. So I also have concerns with honor lock that in order to be done right, like it does cut it down on cheating substantially, but it's a huge workload if we are going to be using it right. So it's not something like you can set it up and not worry about it. Done right, every time a student takes a test, you should be probably spending 10 minutes looking through the recording, checking things. So I agree it cut down cheating a whole lot in my colleagues and my classes, but I'm actually going to be moving away from it next semester because of the massive time commitment and the fact that there are students who are learning how to get around honor lock. Just like we mentioned, students are going to be learning more and more how to write better and better prompts. So good and
Yeah.
bad for everything.
Thank you for bringing those things up, because on the, yes, the one concern, I've had several discussions with Danielle Baumgartner about the, the FERPA things and the confidentiality, and making sure that we're not putting anything into an AI generator that might come from, any of our systems that would have confidential information. And to most of us, that's like common sense, but things could happen. So yes, that's a great point. But then, yeah, again, on the technology, you're right. When you ask a student to download an extension to make a video game work differently, they can do that in seconds. When you ask them to download an extension to take a test in the learning management system, all of a sudden it's really hard. Because it's a different type of, right? It's, we know how to use systems the way we know how to use them. And so giving them the option to take it in the testing center, or I recommend that everybody have early in the semester, long before you have an actual test that you want to use, something like that, for that you have a practice test that they have to use it for. So
Like an extra credit, like.
yeah,
log in on
like,
log, take a screenshot or whatever.
Right,
there's your
yes.
2 points extra credit.
yeah, and you're right as well on the going through it, that so a student takes the test using honor lock, you then get that data, and I get the data of who has looked at the data, and we have very few professors who are. So you could still very well have had a student cheating, but you haven't looked at that data to,
Yeah, so it's really just a
Notice
threat of I might look.
it's a threat that you might look.
I might watch.
Honor
Yeah.
lock doesn't know unless you're using like browsers and such. It doesn't pick up on.
Honor, well,
Or
it,
suspect, like, I think this person might have been shuffling through papers right out of screen. Does
it does all of that,
It'll
yes,
flag
it does
it.
all of
It'll
that, and
flag
it
it.
will
Okay.
flag it for you,
you just have to
and
do the work to go back.
there is a different level of paid
I thought,
subscription that we can do, where there's actually somebody who then will pop up and like a live person and say, Bill, your instructor has indicated that you can't look at papers, and you are. And,
I
but
can see the AI integration in all of this.
right, well, but that's a live proctor person, which honor lock recommends and says, that cuts down way more, because then you tell David, hey, I was taking my test and this happened, and then he's like, no way, I'm not gonna do that, and so word gets around. They say that, somebody popped into my test and logged me out.
Super alarming.
So, yeah, so, but we do not have that level of subscription.
I know it's 11, but I actually had a student who asked Siri for help while being recorded on honor lock this semester. And honor lock flagged it as personal assistant, but I had to click on that student specific test and scroll down in the list to find it. Then I had to listen to the video myself. So it wasn't completely automated it didn't pop up anywhere in totally obvious, hey, this student cheated. I had to go searching through every student's test before I found this one student who had done this. So it's done right, it does require a massive amount of work. Another reason I'm moving away from it is I received an email from the testing center saying that they are not going to let online students take their tests in the testing center anymore when honor lock is an option.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have a lot
Thank
of hurdles to jump. But at the core, I just want to share Alex's academic integrity statement because I love it. It says the purpose many should have is to stay loyal and humble, especially when it comes to academic goals. When it comes to online services that do your work for you, you're not hurting your grades, but also yourself. If you build the practice of using technology to do your work for you, it will develop your mind into thinking. You will always be able to use it, using technology, and when it comes time to do the work yourself, you'll be incapable to do so. So due to the dependency of technology, our minds grow by trial and error. If you make no mistakes by simply allowing AI to do work for you, then you will not grow and become incapable of adjusting and making transitions to difficulties on your own. I love that, right? And this is like first week of instruction. And that's where we want to land, you know, with all these technologies that we're using to guard and whatnot. Ultimately, you want to reach hearts and minds of students. And that's where my fight's going to be, right? And we can use safeguards and tools, but it's really getting in the hearts and minds and challenging where they're at. That's my benediction.
Yeah, sounds like a great place to end. Well, thank you everyone for contributing to a great conversation today. I wish you all the best as we head into this busy time of the year, and have a great Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
David, when you mentioned in the beginning about having 200 students in all of the grading,
Yeah.
it's too late to help you this semester, but one of the things that I learned early on when creating my syllabi